The word fisherman shouldn't have stung the way it did. But when Claudette Rousseau said it, slow, deliberate, with that particular curl at the corner of her mouth, it wasn't a word anymore. It was a verdict. Milo Baudet had been standing in the lobby of the Hargrove Center for about 4 minutes, waiting for the elevator, when she walked in with her entourage. 3 people trailing her, all of them in wool coats that probably cost more than Milo's truck. He hadn't been paying attention to her at all. He was thinking about whether Amber had remembered to take her inhaler to school, and whether the leftover chowder in the fridge was still good, and whether he needed to stop at the co-op on the way home. He wasn't dressed for the building, he knew that. He was wearing his work jacket, the dark green one with the fraying cuff, and his rubber-soled boots, and he was carrying a folder of documents that the Port Authority office had asked him to drop off in person because their fax machine had been broken for 2 weeks. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there to drop off a folder and leave. Claudette Rousseau glanced at him the way people glance at something that doesn't belong, a long sideways look that started at his boots and ended somewhere around his collar. "The service entrance is on Barrington," she said. Milo looked at her. "Sorry, the service entrance." She said it louder with a small gesture toward the glass doors, around the side, on Barrington Street. The woman beside her, assistant maybe, or junior someone, stared at her phone with great concentration. Milo said, "I'm not here for the service entrance, right?" Rousseau tilted her head, the kind of tilt that meant she wasn't listening. "Well, you might want to clean up a bit before you come through the main lobby next time. There are standards here." The elevator opened. She walked in. Her entourage followed. The doors closed. Milo stood there for a moment with his folder. The woman at the reception desk, young, with a red lanyard, was looking at her computer screen with extraordinary focus. Milo pressed the elevator button and waited. He didn't tell anyone about it that evening. He made dinner. He checked Amber's homework. He called his mother back and told her yes, the boat was fine. Yes, he was eating. No, he wasn't coming home for Thanksgiving, because Amber had a school concert that weekend. After he put Amber to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and thought about it for a while, and then he stopped thinking about it and went to bed. In the morning, Amber asked him why his jacket cuff was fraying, and he told her it was old. "Can we get you a new one?" "Not yet." When this one wears out, she considered this seriously. Amber was 7 and she considered most things seriously. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's way of tilting her head when she was thinking, and sometimes when Milo looked at her, he had to breathe through it for a second before he could speak. "It's already wearing out," she pointed out. "A bit more." She accepted this and went back to her cereal. He dropped her at school and drove to the harbor and didn't think about Claudette Rousseau at all. The thing about the commercial fishing industry in Nova Scotia was that it was not what people pictured. People pictured something simpler, something older. They pictured wooden docks and rope and men in yellow slickers. They did not picture the Port Authority compliance meetings, the federal licensing reviews, the environmental impact assessments, the quota negotiations that lasted 3 days and left everyone exhausted and nothing resolved. They did not picture the paperwork. Milo had been running Baudet Marine Services for 6 years since his father had a stroke and could no longer manage the operation himself. His father had started the company in 1987 with 1 boat and a refrigerated truck. By the time Milo took it over, there were 4 boats, 2 trucks, a cold storage facility outside of Dartmouth, and a contract with 3 restaurant groups in Halifax. It was not a small operation. It was also not the kind of operation that showed up in conversations at the Hargrove Center. He had been invited to the Hargrove Center, as it happened, because of a meeting. He almost hadn't gone. The invitation had come through the Nova Scotia Marine Export Partnership, a group Milo had joined 2 years earlier, mostly because his accountant told him to. The meeting was about a new federal program for sustainable seafood certification, something to do with expanded market access, potential contracts with hospital and school food programs, changes to how Canadian suppliers could qualify for preferential status in certain procurement processes. His accountant had said, "You should go, Milo. It matters." So he'd dropped off the folder and gone to the meeting and sat in a room with 14 other people and listened to a man from Ottawa explain a certification matrix for 90 minutes. Claudette Rousseau was not at that meeting. He didn't think about her again for almost 3 weeks. When he did think about her, it was because of Amber. They were at the Hydrostone market on a Saturday, picking up bread and the particular kind of cheese Amber liked that they never had at the regular grocery store. Amber was walking very carefully with the cheese because it was in a paper wrapping, and she had decided the paper wrapping was important to preserve. Dad, yeah, what does it mean when someone's rude to you because of your job? Milo looked at her. Where did this come from? Nowhere. She was still looking at the cheese. Just in general, did someone say something to you? No. A pause. Lydia's mom told Lydia that she shouldn't hang around with Caden because his dad fixes boats for a living, and Lydia told Caden, and Caden was sad. Milo stopped walking. That's not okay, he said. I know. Amber looked up at him. But why do people do that? He thought about Claudette Rousseau. He thought about the lobby and the service entrance and the way the receptionist had looked at her computer screen. Some people think that what you do for work says something about who you are as a person, he said. It doesn't. But some people think it does. That's dumb. Yeah, you fix boats too. Sort of. Sort of. Are you sad when people are like that? He looked at his daughter, 7 years old, carrying her cheese very carefully, looking up at him with her mother's eyes and that particular steady gaze that meant she was going to wait for an honest answer however long it took. Sometimes, he said, for a minute, what do you do after the minute? Keep going. She nodded like this confirmed something she'd already suspected. Okay, she said, and went back to carrying the cheese. The certification meeting had a follow-up, and then a follow-up to the follow-up. By February, there were 6 sessions, a working group, and a subcommittee that Milo somehow ended up chairing because no one else wanted to, and he had made the mistake of knowing what he was talking about. It was at the 5th session that he met Claudette Rousseau properly. She came in late, which she seemed to do by habit. She was with a man named Perriot who worked for a federal ministry Milo couldn't keep straight. She sat across the table from Milo and did not appear to recognize him at all. He recognized her immediately. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He was there to talk about procurement standards, and she was there to talk about federal investment criteria, and they talked about those things for 2.5 hours, and at the end of the meeting she shook his hand briskly and said, "Baudet Marine, right? You're the ones in Dartmouth. I've heard good things about your cold storage operation." "Thanks," Milo said. "We're looking at a few suppliers for the expanded hospital program. Do you have capacity for a year-round contract?" "We do." "Good." She was already writing something in her planner. "Have your office send me the compliance documents. Perriot can give you my information." She left. Perriot gave Milo her card. Milo put it in his jacket pocket, the one with the fraying cuff, and looked at it on the drive home. Claudette Rousseau, Director of Procurement and Strategic Partnerships, Government of Nova Scotia. He put the card on his kitchen table and made dinner. He sent the documents. She called 3 days later on a Thursday morning, when he was on the dock at 6:30 in the morning watching his crew bring in the morning haul. He had his phone tucked against his shoulder and he was also signing something on a clipboard. "Mr. Baudet, the certifications are impressive. I want to schedule a site visit." "Sure," he said. "When works for you?" "Next week if possible. Wednesday." "Wednesday works." There was a pause. He could hear office sounds on her end, a printer, a door. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," he said again. "Why is your company not better known? I pulled your numbers last night. Your operation is one of the largest independent marine suppliers in the Maritimes. You've had 3 consecutive years of clean audits and 2 sustainability certifications that most suppliers in your category don't have. Why haven't I heard of you?" Milo watched one of his crew members, a kid named Bastien who'd been with him for 2 years, haul a crate across the dock with the particular efficient ease of someone who'd been doing it since they were 12. "We don't do a lot of marketing," he said. "That's apparent." Another pause. "Wednesday at 9, she said. "I'll bring Perriot." She hung up. She came on Wednesday at 9. She brought Perriot and also a woman named Dufresne who worked in supply chain analysis and who had opinions about refrigeration unit configurations that Milo found, unexpectedly, completely reasonable. Claudette Rousseau walked through the cold storage facility in a wool coat that was not suited for the temperature and didn't complain about it once. She asked questions that were sharp and specific and didn't require him to explain basic things twice. She looked at the compliance binders. She talked to Bastien for about 10 minutes about processing timelines. At the end of the tour, she stood in the parking lot looking at the harbor and said, "This is a serious operation." "Yes," Milo said. I didn't expect it to be this serious. He looked at her. What did you expect? She turned to look at him. Something shifted in her expression, not quite discomfort but something adjacent to it. Honestly, I expected something smaller. He didn't say anything. She held his gaze for a moment. I should tell you, I think we've met before, in the lobby of the Hargrove Center back in the fall. Milo waited. I said something I shouldn't have. Her voice was even, but she wasn't looking away. About the service entrance. I thought you were a... I assumed I was wrong. I know, he said. I'm sorry. The harbor was gray and cold behind her. Bastien was doing something with a hand truck near the loading bay. Dufresne and Perriot were talking by the rental car. Okay, Milo said. That's it? That's it. She looked at him for a moment longer like she was trying to work out whether he meant it or whether he was just being polite. He meant it. He'd had a long time to get good at accepting apologies without needing them to be more complicated than they were. The contract is likely going through, she said finally. You'll hear from Perriot by the end of the month. Good. She nodded and went to join Dufresne and then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, she said, the fraying cuff on your jacket. I noticed it that day and I think I used it to make a snap judgment about you. I notice you still have the same jacket. Milo looked down at his cuff. My daughter keeps telling me to get a new one. She's right. She usually is. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed Claudette Rousseau's face. Then she turned and walked to the car, and that was that. The contract came through at the end of February, as promised. It was a significant contract, hospital food programs across 3 health authorities, with a renewable clause and a review at 18 months. Milo's accountant called him at 8 o'clock in the evening to say, I told you to go to that meeting. Milo said, yes, you did. Amber was at the kitchen table doing homework when he got off the phone. She didn't look up. Good news? Yeah, what kind? Work stuff. A big contract. She considered this. Is that why you're smiling? I didn't know I was smiling. She looked at him very directly. You are. He sat down across from her. I think it might let us get you that new coat for spring, the waterproof one you wanted. Her face did something complicated, trying not to look excited and failing completely. The one with the yellow lining? Yeah, okay, she said, very seriously, and went back to her homework. He made tea and sat at the kitchen table and looked at the stack of documents on the counter, the contract, the compliance paperwork, the certification files, and thought about the lobby of the Hargrove Center, and the elevator, and the cold storage facility, and the harbor. He thought about Claudette Rousseau standing in the parking lot saying, I assumed, with the particular steadiness of someone who wasn't used to saying it. He thought about Amber asking, what do you do after the minute, and him saying keep going, and meaning it. In March, there was a public announcement about the hospital procurement program, a press conference at Province House that Milo was invited to attend. He almost didn't go. He had a meeting with his boat maintenance crew that morning, and a call with his accountant at noon, and Amber had a dentist appointment at 3:30. He went for 90 minutes in the middle and stood near the back in his good jacket. He'd bought a new one in February, dark navy, no fraying, and listened to 3 officials speak about sustainable local sourcing and strengthening the maritime supply chain. Claudette Rousseau spoke last. She was precise and clear and didn't use many words she didn't need. She mentioned several suppliers by name, including Baudet Marine Services, which she described as a family-run operation out of Dartmouth that should have been on our radar years ago. The Minister of Health, who was standing 2 people to her left, leaned over and said something to her. She nodded. Milo was looking at his phone. He had a text from Amber's school saying she'd brought her inhaler today without being reminded, and another from Bastien saying the morning haul was good. He looked up at the right moment to see Claudette Rousseau's gaze land on him across the room. He gave her a single nod. She gave him one back. The minister shook his hand afterward and said something about what a fine operation he was running up there in Dartmouth. Milo thanked him. One of the journalists asked if he'd be willing to do a short interview for the Provincial Agricultural and Fisheries Brief, and he said yes, and the interview lasted 7 minutes and was mostly about refrigeration logistics. When it was over, he drove to the dentist's office and sat in the waiting room and read a magazine about home renovations from 2021 until Amber came out with the particular expression of someone who has been told their teeth are fine. How were the teeth, he asked. Fine, she said with great dignity. Good, They drove home. She wanted to stop at the Hydrostone for the cheese again, so they did. She carried it very carefully. "Dad," she said in the car. "Yeah." Caden said his dad got a new job, an office job. Milo glanced at her. "Is that good?" "Caden thinks so." A pause. "But I think Caden's dad liked fixing boats." Milo drove for a moment. "Sometimes people make choices because of other people," he said. "Because of how other people make them feel about what they do. Is that what happened?" "I don't know. Maybe." Amber looked out the window. The streets were wet from an earlier rain, and the late afternoon light made everything look like it had been rinsed clean. "I think you should always do what you actually like," she said. "Even if some people think it's not fancy enough." "Yeah," Milo said. "I think so too." He ran into Claudette Rousseau one more time that spring, unexpectedly, at the farmer's market at the seaport. She was alone, which surprised him. He'd never seen her without Perriot or Dufresne or someone, and she was holding a paper cup of coffee and looking at a stall that sold hand-thrown pottery. She saw him before he saw her and said, "Baudet, Rousseau." She looked at his jacket. "New one. My daughter wore me down. Smart girl." He noticed she was holding a small bowl, pale blue, irregular, the kind of thing that took someone a long time to make. "You do ceramics?" he said. "My sister does. I come to pick up whatever she has this week." She turned the bowl in her hands. "She works in an office during the week. Makes these on weekends. Our mother spent years telling her she should focus on the office job. Did it work?" "For a while." A small pause. "Not permanently." They stood there for a moment, two people at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning, each holding a coffee. "The contract review at 18 months, she said. "I'd like to schedule it early. Your numbers from the first quarter are very good. I'll have my office send the file." "Do that." She looked at the bowl again. "How's your daughter?" "She got the coat with the yellow lining." Claudette Rousseau looked up. This time the smile didn't almost happen. "It happened," she said. She put the bowl back. She picked up a larger one in the same pale blue. Milo finished his coffee and found Amber at the bread stall 20 feet away, where she was apparently having a serious conversation with the vendor about the difference between sourdough and whole wheat. He stood back and watched her for a moment. 7 years old and serious about everything. Her mother's eyes, the yellow lining of her new coat just visible at the collar. He thought about the lobby of the Hargrove Center and the word fisherman in Claudette Rousseau's mouth and the elevator closing. He thought about what it cost to stay the same person, regardless of who was watching. He thought about keep going. He thought, yes, exactly, keep going. He walked over to his daughter and put his hand on her shoulder, and she looked up and said, "Dad, did you know sourdough takes 3 days to make?" With the particular delight of someone who has just found out something important about the world. He said he did know that. She said she hadn't. He bought a loaf, and they walked back through the market in the pale spring light, his daughter carrying the bread with both hands, the harbor visible at the end of the road, the boats riding easy on the water.